Hi, welcome to Susan Stanley Stitch in Time. If you're new, thank you for trying me out and joining me today. I hope you'll stick around. If you're coming back, I appreciate you so much, and I'm excited about the continued conversation that I know we're going to have. On this channel, I like to talk about cross stitch, quilting, textiles, and sewing notions from the past, and I share with you my projects and some other interesting tidbits. So welcome, and today we're going to look at my WIPs. We're going to have an 1840s chart parade. I have a new project I'm going to share with you. I will show you how I prepared Mary Snow for framing and the next steps I took to get her ready for that. I have some books to share. I have a little bit of haul. I have a quilt and a doll quilt. I have a very, very special announcement that I hope you will stick around to hear. And I will answer some of your comments and questions that I always love to receive. And I have a gift to show you. So it's going to be a fun episode. Let's get going. So let's take a look at my WIPs. My WIPs are also focused on 1840 time period, and the one I was super anxious to get to was Hannah Lancaster. She's in the Worcester Art Museum, and I love so much about her. I love the colors. I'm not typically drawn to yellow, but somehow this goldy yellow and green just make me happy. I wanted to stitch this girl in the worst way, and of course the house. The border has a lot of color changes, but so far so good. I've not made a ton of progress because I spent a lot of time auditioning thread and linen to find that marriage of floss and fiber that I love. That just for this project, that just felt good. That just, you know when it clicks and it's just right and you just can't put your needle down. That's what I was searching for. So I auditioned, of course I pulled the DMC because that's what this is charted for, and then I auditioned some 103s. I did a conversion with some help from Needle in a Haystack, and then when I was at the attic for Sampler Symposium, I pulled the floss in Soie d'Alger, did my own conversion there. I'm going to put a picture in of the three so you can kind of see the range and so notice the similarities and the differences. So I'll put that in here. And so I initially thought the 103 was going to make my heart sing. I'm stitching this on 38 count Legacy Linen Foxtail Millet with a number 28 needle. And I started stitching with the 103, and I enjoyed it. It was fine, but somehow it just wasn't, there was just, something was missing. It just didn't have that oomph for me. This wasn't pulling off of the linen and popping the way I wanted it to. So on the other side of the linen, I began stitching in Soie d'Alger, and I am so much happier with this. I just feel like the color, I did bump the colors a teeny bit. That green I bumped up a little bit based on availability. Of course I can't, I had to work my way over to get to that dress. That's what it's all about. And that little tiny shoe with the little foot with the little blue shoe. Oh my goodness. So fun. So anyway, I like the coverage. I love the texture. I love the color. This is the perfect marriage in my mind. It's making me really, really happy. So anyway, that's where I am with Hannah, and Hannah is going to be a long-term project. And actually, I misspoke on Hannah. I am stitching her on Fuller's Teasel, which is 38 count. Now, if you're interested in either of those conversions that I did for 103 or Soie d'Alger, Soie, just Soie d'Alger, just private message me. I know I had posted one earlier, and I've done some adaptations, so let me know. The next stitch I'm doing, this is Mary Bretnell 1839 by Hedgerow Stitching, and my intention with this one is to try to replicate what Mary would have used. Goblin's is a filament, I'm using Goblin's, and it's a filament silk that has the same thickness, the same dimensions as what was available at the time that this was stitched. And I'm stitching it on 30 count Mariner's map. And I understand, and I learn by doing, as you'll hear throughout this episode. I wanted a thread that was the same construction of what was available in 1840. It would have been something that was hand spun. This is pre-industrial revolution. It was the mechanization of things was just beginning. This was a different time. So I did get some really great background history from Rebecca of Hedgerow Stitching on Mary that I hope to read over in depth and share a little bit with you next time. But this is what I've done so far. Not making huge strides. I've been working on other things, but enjoyed that band. And, this I can see for a 7-year-old, this was a very appropriate level project for her. I can tell she had fun pulling colors. And, of course, I wanted to stitch all the red first. But I'm enjoying that stitch quite a bit. So that's my WIPs. So before I share my 1840s chart parade with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about why I'm focusing on 1840 this year. What am I looking at? What am I trying to learn from this study? I want to talk a little bit about what was happening in the USA and the world at large during this time. Now, 1840 was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, which means it was the beginning of things being manufactured in mills and by mechanization on a large scale factories. Before that, prior to that, everything was done by hand. I find that so fascinating in a time period that we live in now where everything is done by machine. It was a time period when there was a rapid production of fabric, which meant there was more available. A machine can put a lot more out and a lot quicker than hand work. There were no wars going on worldwide, and this impacted what people were making and doing. There was the beginning of this time period where the mill girls, which we will talk about at some point later, but young women would go to work in factories, and although there was still home production going on because that transition really hadn't happened, this was a new adventure and a really big change in society where people were going out of their homes to work and produce things. People were moving west as a result of the Louisiana Purchase, and they were settling in the west of the United States, and commerce was beginning, the railroads were coming through, and goods and services were actually transmitted so much easier than had been previously. People had agency. They could own their own land. They could make money from it. River settlement was really popular because it allowed access to products and services. We think sometimes it's hard to get merchandise. There was some merchandise for people in outposts. It was impossible for them to get. Very, very difficult. Education was expanding and samplers were being stitched, but that was not in a vacuum. And I'm really exploring the other stitching that was going on by these young girls, mostly, who were stitching samplers, and as part of their education, they were learning mending, they were learning how to make clothes, they were learning patchwork, they were learning so many other needlework skills. Of course, my focus is textiles and needlework. And sometimes for some of these young children, the stitching journey began as early as 3 and 4 years of age. So very, very different way of life than what we experience now. So let's take a look at these 1840s charts and see if we can find any commonalities. So here are some of the charts that I have collected from 1840. You know, it's always, you know, you never know why you buy things, but there's something that draws you to them. So this one is by GGR, of course, and it's Bridget Power 1840, and there've been some amazing starts on it and finishes. But you know what draws me to this basket of flowers? I could probably just stitch that and be very happy, but I think I'd like to do the whole thing. I read through the chart. I don't have any information on where this is from. It looks very Spanish or Italian. I don't know. If you know anything about this, I'd love to know. But the flowers are what drew me to it. And these flowers in the background almost look like a damask or a brocade. I'm sure they were much more vibrant originally, but I'm looking forward to stitching this someday. I just think it's gorgeous. So this is from the 1840s. Somewhere. All right, next one I have shown you before, and I really, this one just is calling to me. There's something about the colors. This has been reinterpreted. There were some 3/4 threads, and you know, some funny things that this little girl did. Unfortunately, there's no town mentioned, so Vicki and Megan weren't able to find, according to the chart, where Mary Carr is from. But this is also an 1840s chart. Not really anything similar to the last one I showed you, but of course, what draws me to this, I love these animals in the grass. I love the full coverage and the way it makes them pop off of the linen. And then this tomato plant just makes me crazy. I will probably stitch this, I'm thinking, on cloister cream. That is the one that has different threads dyed for the warp and the weft and woven together, and I'm anxious to try that. I don't know. We'll have to see. All right, so that's Mary Carr. Next 1840 chart that I want to show you is a teeny tiny little chart that I found when I was at the attic. Now this ends up being about 4 inches. This is just a sweet little miniature marking sampler, Louisa Gem 1840. And it is an exact reproduction of an historic sampler. So it was originally stitched with cotton on linen, according to the person who drafted out the chart. I just loved the size when I saw it. It just sucked me in. The colors are a little more vibrant than you see in real life, than you see in the picture, but I just thought it was so sweet. So that's an 1840s chart. Another 1840s chart that I have just loved for a long time. I'm going to hold this up because you really can't see it from a distance. Now this is Sarah Wilson, 1837. So I'm looking, you know, 1837, 1842 type charts. This border is a little bit like Hannah Lancaster, but of course the ladies with the broom. It's mostly cross stitch. The scarlet, it's of course a scarlet letter chart reproduced by her. These working class girls selling brooms, they just suck me in right away. This Sarah Wilson was obviously seeing that in her life, or maybe someone in her family had that occupation. I don't know. I love the oversized people next to the house. I love that quirkiness. The carnation and rose border, like I said, I love. But I think, you know, this out of proportion stuff that's going on is what draws me in, and I love the ladies. So I hope to stitch this someday too. But that's another one from that same time period. Right, Modern Folk Embroidery has one that a lot of people have stitched, and it is Joan Sands, the Hogmanay Sampler, 1839. So here we are. This is Scottish. So we've gone from England, Scotland, I think the miniature marking was American. The Worcester, I think, was English, but it was in Massachusetts now. But anyway, interesting. I love the soft colors. And, of course, Hogmanay is New Year's Eve. So she finished this or stitched it or was born or something. I don't know. On that date. Has some eyelet stitches. I love this carnation border. I love the soft house. I love this tree bush. I don't know if this is a rose bush. I've also seen it called an Angus tree. And this little motif here reminds me of a trip around the world quilt. I'll hold that up to you. And this one has, you know, this bold big alphabet in eyelets, and I see that in a lot of marking samplers. They have one row of bold eyelet stitches. And then there's Clementine Welch, which is a Queenstown sampler. She is from 1840. Beautiful colors in this one, just beautiful. Try to scoot that in just a tiny bit. Sure. Clementine Welch. She was 8 years old. She was from Ohio, Logan County. So you can see what I notice is that the border is much simpler, and there isn't as much attention drawn to the alphabets, and there are fewer motifs. Now, I don't have every 1840 sampler out there, so I'm just basing my observations on the charts that I've purchased, and maybe it's just a style that I happen to like, and that's why I'm seeing this. But it has a sweet poem on it that was a quote, partial quote of a poem by William Broome, The Rosebud. I just thought that was really sweet. So that might be stitched one day. And then another one that I love and I've wanted to stitch. You know, there's certain ones, you pull them out, they kind of make your heart beat faster and they call to you. Well, Anne Roberts is definitely one of them. 1842. This is a Welsh sampler. And in the chart, Nicola gives tons of information in the front about Welsh traditions, and it's just a really great resource book. Anne was 8 at the time that a national school was built. And so it's presumed that she probably learned under one of the school mistresses there, and that's probably where she did her sampler. So what draws me into this sampler? I love the buildings. Of course, I love that grass that Brenda hates, but I mean, I don't always love stitching it, but I love what it does to the images on it. And the border, and of course these colors, these are my colors, the red, green, and blue. Those are just colors that sing to me. So Anne Roberts, she is definitely on the list for a start someday. And then we have a lovely chart by Christina of Whilst Iris Knapps. Now this one is a lot like the one I showed you earlier that Jacob had done, Joan Sands. She's also got these big eyelet alphabets. Lots of cross stitch. This one is Scottish. It's 1840. I love this top band, of course. And I will stitch this on Wayfarer's Cloak. I think Jody of Trixie Tricycle did that, and I saw it finished, and it was gorgeous. So this is another one, another marking sampler on the list. This one's always intrigued me because I feel like it's just super unusual for, I don't know, it just looks like unusual to me. This border is, it just almost contemporary looking, and the colors as well. So unfortunately, Needlework Press doesn't have information on Sarah Barker, 1840, but she did put her year how old she was and the year she stitched it. The internal bands are interesting, you know, so she's practicing some of these internal bands for possibly marking on clothing. I don't know, but such a unique little sampler. It does look like sunflowers. And then the last one is another marking sampler that Rebecca of Hedgerow Stitching owns. And this is Mary Heath, 1841. This little girl was from Cornwall, and Rebecca lives in Cornwall. So how neat is that for her to have this? This little marking sampler has the four-sided stitch, Algerian eyelet, and eyelet stitch. And why do I love this? Oh, well, I love it because it's from Cornwall. My friend Rebecca lives in Cornwall, and it's just a sweet little marking sampler. I can imagine. And Rebecca has found a bit out about Mary. So those are some fun charts that I'm considering. I do see a few commonalities. What do I see? I see alphabets and simple stitches and some eyelet stitches on the marking samplers in a variety of colors. And on the more advanced samplers, the only thing I really see is a little bit of full coverage popping in, but there's no Berlin work. And I guess that's going to come later, as I've been reading about Berlin work. So yeah, happy to share those with you. So there's my 1840 charts that I have in my collection right now, and I'm not really sure why I'm drawn to things. I don't really see a ton of commonality between them. I talked about what I did observe. I would love to know if you have an 1840s favorite, or between 1837 and 1842. If you have a favorite, why it's your favorite, what draws you to it. Is it purely the look of it? Is there something significant behind the meaning of it or where it's from? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And what did you like about these charts? What chart if you were me, what chart would you start next? What chart would you kit up? I will probably kit 2 up. I will likely do my own conversion, either I might for a marking sampler try wool, I'm not sure yet. For the pictorial sampler, I'm really loving a Versoix Soie d'Alger. I don't know if I'll continue with that, but likely, maybe I'll try 103. But yeah, let me know. For the marking sampler, I think I am going to again try to get into the time frame that this was and the aesthetic that was available to these young stitchers in 1840. So they would go to a school, the mistress would give them the best quality linen she could find. Typically that was from Belgium and it was sun bleached. So I might try like Victorian sponge cake. I haven't stitched on that yet. There's also one called Swan Feather that I haven't tried. I want to try that. I did find out that Mariner's Map is a yarn dyed linen, which means the linen threads are dyed prior to the weaving. It's not piece dyed, which would mean that that the whole woven piece is dyed after the fact. I feel good about that because in fabric, when it's yarn dyed, there is no chance that the thread hiding under the weave is going to have any white that didn't get touched, absorbed, and to absorb the dye. So that'll be my next adventure. So if you were me, which 2 would you start? Let me know. I have a new project that I'm doing, and inspired by so many of you who are adapting their jewelry cases, travel jewelry cases for stitching. And so I have an idea for my Kiwana, the way I'd like to adapt it. I'm going to use these items right here. This will be just a little teaser. I want to base this on the novel by Thomas Hardy, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. That novel was set in 1870 in rural England, and it kind of expresses, as one commentator said, the ache of modernism. And I kind of have that theme going on this year. So this is I'm calling her Tess. I don't know who this little girl is, but this just sneak peek. And this fabric on the bottom here, just gorgeous. I just love it. And it was given to me by a friend. And this is from 1840. This is reproduced from a quilt in 1840. And that selvage has all that important information. So stay tuned. I'll have more to share with you next time I'm back. Okay, so I want to give you the update on Mary Snow. Now, if you were here, if you've been here, you've seen me progress through stitching Mary Snow. And last time I talked about how I cleaned her, that sampler before, and blocked it and got it ready for framing. After washing it, the fibers were so refreshed. I'm really excited about the options of doing that again in the future. That I just love how it looks. I blocked it, and I got the information from, my knowledge of blocking things, but also I looked at Katie's tutorial in her Simple Harmonies collection of tutorials. I believe it was number 9. I will insert a photo in here of Mary Snow being blocked. So after she was blocked and dried, I stitched guidelines with red thread, exactly 11 threads away from the border of the fabric, because I learned from doing, and I wanted the experience of trying to get as close to framing this myself as possible. So I did that, and I will insert a picture here. I wanted it to be as professional as possible. I looked at every piece of information I could find on how to finish a sampler for framing, and so this is what I came up with. So here's a picture of the guidelines that I stitched. And one of the reasons I like to try things is because I really learned a lot from this process. I'm really, really glad I did it. It will inform me when I use a framer. It'll give me the information on the questions to ask when I hand my work over to them, and it helps. It just helps acquire skill. Someday, maybe I'll be able to do this myself. But anyway, so next step was I purchased the acid-free foam core board, and I went to a framing shop and just had them cut it for me. I measured 1/4 inch beyond on all sides the stitching, and those guidelines were going to hit right on that edge of that foam core board. So I got that, and I pinned, after I found the center horizontally and vertically, I pinned Mary Snow. I pinned top and bottom, side and side, and then I kept going top, bottom, side, 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 all the way around with the pins. And I'll show you a picture of that. Okay, that wasn't too bad. It's fiddly work. It's not hard. I had a couple of phone conversations while I was doing it. It took a lot longer than I thought. I have a new respect, or an even greater respect, for framers and the job that they do. So that was a good learning process. And then I laced the fabric that was left over on the back. And I'll show you a picture of Mary Snow when she was ready to go to the framer. All right, so I know I took her to the framer, and I took her to a framing shop that was recommended by the local needlework shop here in Seattle area. Thread Needle Street recommended that I go to Heidi's place in Bothell. And so she was so gracious and so lovely, and she said she's been working with needlework for 30 years, and it takes time to learn these skills. She said my techniques and the process I used was very good, but I could even see that the corner was a little off. And I said, this is so symmetrical, and the border is it just has to be square. I mean, that grass line below the swans was bugging me. If there were distances all the way around that were uneven, that was going to drive me crazy. So as we talked about it, she told me she could compensate with the frame, and I said, you know, I think my lacing tension was off. I thought it was pretty consistent, but I think that last corner, probably because it was the last thing I did and I was excited to be done, I probably pulled it a little too tight. So it threw that bottom right corner off a tiny bit. And so I just said, you know what, repin it, lace it, get it ready for framing. And she was very, very kind and very gracious, and she encouraged me to try it again, and she's willing to work with me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. A side note, I thought she was very reasonable, but she knows me, and she knows I'm curious and I want to try these things. So in 3 to 4 weeks, I should have her back from the framer, and I'll be able to share the fully finished Mary Snow with you at that point. I want to share a few books with you that I've been looking at. This one is so sweet. It's called The Girl's Own Book by Mrs. L. Maria Child. It's published in cooperation with Old Sturbridge Village. I love the graphics in it. It was originally published in 1834. So why am I interested in this? Well, as you know, I've been exploring stitching of young girls, not only samplers, but patchwork, mending, clothing making, all of the sewing that they were required to learn. And so I am looking at some of these primary sources to see exactly what were they told and how were they taught. Now this book is so sweet. It's got a whole bunch of things like games and poems and all sorts of things, but it has a whole chapter on needlework and plain sewing. And it's just fascinating to look at what these young ladies were doing at such a tender age. I mean, some of them were just tiny little things. How to make a pin cushion, how to make emery bags, how to make needle books, and written in English, but sometimes in terminology that's a little bit difficult to understand because of the way our language has evolved. So anyway, I got this and I've started looking through it, and it's just charming. And I'll add that to my plain sewing and early childhood book collection. And then another book, this book was recommended to me by a friend, and I had started reading it before my last Floss Tube, but I hadn't gotten to the section on flax in America. So I know I asked, does anybody know? And I loved everybody's responses. I had people from Pennsylvania, South Dakota, New York, all over the place message me and say, yes, I have evidence of flax seeds being grown here. You know, the conditions had to be just right for linen. But this book is on cloth commerce and industry in early Pennsylvania. And of course, yes, there was flax grown in early Pennsylvania. And why was I interested in this book? Well, my friend thought I would like it because it talks all about the development of textile commerce in the pre-industrial age. And, you know, I've said it before, you've heard it before, but textiles were incredibly valuable during that time because they were super labor intensive and really hard to come by. So everything textile had to be made by hand, and this book is going to give me a little bit of a glimpse into that. But yes, flax was grown in Pennsylvania as well. And of course, then there was linen. So those are my 2 new reads. I highly recommend them both. They're great. I have one new acquisition to share with you. I haven't received my Needlework Expo Market purchases, but this new purchase is a thimble. I went to the Sewing Expo in Washington State at the State Fairgrounds, and Thimbles for You was there, and she makes the most gorgeous thimble. This is a tailor's thimble. It's made to be worn right above the knuckle, and you push from the side of the finger. And I just love it. You can't ever have too many thimbles. So it's like a piece of jewelry. It's sterling silver, and I just want to collect them all. She makes the most gorgeous. If you go on her website, you can see the silversmith work that she does. So I have just been so happy sewing with this needle, with this thimble. My other thimble is longer, and it's just very basic. This one, oh, so pretty, so pretty. So that's my new haul. So I want to share this quilt that I have behind me. You might recognize it. Some of you I know are working on it. I see people on Instagram posting blocks. I'm excited that this quilt is still of interest to folks out there. This quilt is called Hope's Journey. It was from a book that was published by Betsy Chutchin. Now, I was very fortunate to live in Texas when Betsy was piloting this project. So I got to get in on that and work through all the steps of putting this quilt together as she was composing the book. And then after the book was composed, after the book was done, I had moved to Washington. I was fortunate and got to teach it to a group of people up here. So that was just really great. So this quilt is really unique. This is a sampler. This is a sampler quilt. Each block is a unique block. There are no repeats unless it's within a block. They are often a sampler quilt would have been composed of blocks that were given in exchange of friendship. They also can be what we would call orphan blocks, blocks that were left over from a project that weren't used and just didn't have a home. So they would go into a sampler, and they are just showcasing different blocks. They are a little bit haphazard. They're not balanced. They're a puzzle. You're trying to make the pieces fit. Sometimes you have to do filler blocks, like a row of half-square triangles or flying geese, to put it all together to make the measurements work. Each of these blocks has a story. Each of these blocks relates to the 1800s, something that was going on in the 1800s, that whole westward expansion that I was talking about earlier with the charts. It's very scrappy, as we call it, meaning there is not a lot of repeat in fabric. There is not really a rhyme or reason to the colors, although there kind of is. There are certain colors that aren't used, but it's just kind of lively, kind of chaotic, kind of fun, with a lot of meaning and a lot of history. Probably my favorite, well, I don't know, I have blocks. Well, if you're familiar with the pattern, you will recognize that there are a lot of blocks in here that are not in the book, and they are my orphan blocks that I just added in to make it work. I probably like the feathered star in the center the best, and I will pop a picture in here of the full quilt because you're not seeing the whole thing here behind me, but let me put that in right now. And I'll also add the label. So this quilt means a lot to me because it was a time I finished it right before I moved from Texas up to Washington, and I was saying goodbye to some people who'd become really dear to me in that short period of time that I lived there. I didn't live there super long, but made some really good friends. So it has a lot of meaning and significance in that way, and I can almost remember stitching some of these where I was, what was going on at the time, and that's pretty meaningful too. When I moved to Washington and taught the class, I always do something a little bit fun above and beyond the class, and so I reduced the blocks, you know, shrunk them down, and gave everyone in the class each month, they had the block in the book and then a reduced block, and I'll show you that. I made a doll quilt with the miniature blocks. And they're teeny tiny, and some of them were really, really fussy, and so my intention was to have a quilt for a small bed for a child, and then this quilt for their stuffed animal or a doll or something that for the child to play with. I don't have the child yet, or picked out, or who's going to get it, but someday maybe I will have somebody that I can share this with. So that's Hope's Journey and Hope's Journey small size. I have a really special announcement I want to make. I have something else that I'm sharing that centers around 1840 doll quilts and the sewing materials, methods, and notions that would have been available at that time. And I've been working on this since last year, and it's a project that I will be sharing with you over the next few Floss Tubes. I can't wait. I think you're gonna love it. I'm super excited about it, and stay tuned because more is coming. Now I would like to address some of your comments and questions, and thank you again for all of you who write in. I love hearing every little thing from each and every one of you. I could never share every comment on my Floss Tube that I receive, but you are able to go in and read them for yourself, and you will learn so much. This is such a knowledgeable community, such a wealth of storytelling and experiences. Really would benefit each and every one of you to read the beautiful, encouraging comments and just the great wealth of information. So some of the comments I have to table until next time. So I'm going to take care of I'm going to talk about two of them this week. One of the questions was, will I ever have the antique quilt quilted? Or do I ever have antique quilts quilted? And last week I had, in episode 28, last time, I had an antique quilt top hanging behind me. And that quilt top is fragile. It was constructed in such a way that the borders would be very ripply. It was not measured accurately. That would be really hard to quilt and have it lay flat and actually look decent. So that quilt is a great study in fabric. It's a great study in construction. I love being able to see the back and how it was pieced, how the pieces were pieced together, seeing the underside. So no, I will never have that one quilted. I like having it just the way it is. I like learning from it. Now, if you have an antique piece, and I am asked this question a lot, please be very, very careful if you are considering having it quilted or quilting it. A long arm machine is a powerful machine, and the head on that long arm needle will probably puncture and tear an antique textile. It might be possible to stitch it on, or to quilt it on your domestic machine, but there again, you might have the same problem. Some of those fibers are old. They've been stored in plastic, which I'm going to talk about next. They're brittle and they will decompose. Hand quilting it or tying it might be your best option, and even then, the more you handle it, depending on its age and the condition that it's in, So it's really, I would be careful if it really means a lot to you and you are passionate about having it quilted. Explore options, but be very careful and make sure you hand it over to somebody, if you aren't doing the work yourself, who really knows what they're doing. Now, the next question. Do I ever store fabric in plastic? This is a tough one because I learned the hard way. Before I was given the information, I did store all my fabric in tubs under my bed. That was the only place I had. I believe I learned after years of that, when I pulled things out, they were brittle and crunchy. And then I found out the truth. And what the truth is that natural fibers need to breathe. They need oxygen, and they need to be protected from the sun, and they can be protected from dust, but they cannot be sealed up in plastic where they cannot breathe. And short term, not a problem. Years and years, which is what I experienced, you're going to end up being really sad. Now, some of the fabrics that I thought were lost and gone forever, and we're talking, 40 years, 30 years of storage in plastic, were refreshed by washing them. So they, they revived. And so that wasn't a problem after that. But no, I would try really hard to protect your textiles and store them in a place where they can breathe. My finished quilts, if they're not on display, if I want to put them away, typically you just put them in a pillowcase. Linen, I store in a basket in a dark spot. My threads are in plastic right now, but there are holes in the little baggies, so I feel like that's okay because they are able to breathe. I hope that answers your question. Let me know if you have any further questions, or if you have information or a great storage tip, because the smaller space, the more frugal you have to be with the way you store things. I don't know, frugal's the right word. Careful. You have to be thoughtful about it. All right, I want to share with you a lovely gift that I received from a lady who has been following me from the very beginning. Her name is Rebecca Poole, and she invited me, well, she told me about a year ago about a sampler that she acquired and that she was having it charted. And the final purpose of charting the sampler was to offer it as something for her guild to make available to her guild members to purchase. And so she has been communicating with me back and forth about this beautiful sampler, and this week I received the chart for the sampler and some information on her guild. So this is the sampler. This is a picture of it. It's a Scottish sampler. It's just darling. It checks all the boxes. It's got the house, the letters. I love these corner motifs. Just lovely. And along with that, she sent me information on how to become a member of the Western Reserve Sampler Guild, and I will link this information below. And everything I've talked about today, the books, anything that I can pass on to you, I will link below in the description box. This is Margaret Wingate, 1835, a Scottish sampler. Now, she said if you are interested in becoming a part of the guild, they are going to have some fabulous speakers this year. Katie Strachan is going to be via Zoom, one of the speakers. They're going to have Marcia Parker from the Scarlet Letter talking about Quaker samplers and Daughters of the American Revolution and Women in History. So it sounds like a really active guild. If you are wanting some connection with more stitchers, take advantage of this. They have some other charts available as well, and I hope this helps you. And thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that with me. All right. In closing, next video, I'll have some new starts. I'll show you what I'm considering, maybe what I've pulled together and kitted up. I'll have more works in progress and some more books. I'll have another quilt, and of course we'll look at some more of your comments and questions, and I will share a little more about my special announcement and give you a little more information on that project. So until next time, make time for stitching.